You know, Jeff, it's been about, I don't know, 6 months. No, about a year and 6 months now since you and I watched Slammiversary 2018 because we were reading all these rave reviews about it, and it was finally an Impact Plus, and people were saying it was the greatest Impact show of all time, the greatest Impact pay-per-view they'd ever put on. And you and I watched, and we're like, yeah, it was good, but we both listed off other TNA pay-per-views that were ahead of it, and I listed off Bound for Glory 2005 as, in my opinion, the greatest TNA slash Impact pay-per-view of all time, and you said, really? I've never seen it. Um, and now we're in this midst of this COVID stuff, and we are looking for things to watch. And I said, like, well, let's go back and watch Bound for Glory 2005 and just talk about the show itself, and then also talk about the repercussions that could have happened after the show went off the air. And going back and watching it again on Friday night, I have to say my opinion of this show has not changed. It is still a great, great show.
Oh, mine either. In fact, I seriously believe this is the best TNA Impact ever, or TNA pay-per-view ever. Maybe they were referring to Impact as a brand, and that's why they called that one the best Impact show ever. I could maybe get behind that, because at the time Impact was only 2 years old. But this is easily the best pay-per-view that I can remember seeing. It made me really remember how great TNA was from about 2002 till probably about 2009, maybe even 2010 when Hogan and Bischoff took over.
Yeah, I mean, this is a show that starts off with the debut of Jushin Thunder Liger in TNA taking on the undefeated Samoa Joe. The middle of the card has an incredible Iron Man match for 30 minutes between AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels. But really, what I think, aside from those two things, I think the third pillar upon which this show stands, I should say the third and the fourth, is that professional wrestling is always at its best, in my opinion, when there's a story running through the entire night. And in this case, there's actually two of them running through the entire night that culminate together at the close of the show. You've got the story of Kevin Nash being in the hospital, Larry Zbyszko having to make a decision as to who's going to end up filling his spot to wrestle for the World Championship against Jeff Jarrett, and all the stuff that's encompassed in there. And then you have the story going on with Jeff Jarrett and his new stable and Gail Kim and them trying to be dominant over the brand throughout all this chaos going on. And when all that comes together in the last half an hour of the show, it is just pure joy to me. This show takes risks. This is a show where on that night it felt like anything could happen. And not everything goes perfectly on this show, but at least they try new things. And I think every match on this card has something to promote it. Welcome to Kingdom of Honor. My name is Zanman Shane Sabunia. My good buddy talking with me here is the Honorable Jeff. Thank you for joining us here on LOP Radio. Thank you for joining us on YouTube.
And if you are listening on YouTube, go ahead, hit that like button, ring the notification bell, and subscribe to the channel. We'd greatly appreciate it. But you forgot the highlight of the entire 3-hour broadcast was watching a Murder Hawk moonsault. There was something so great about watching Lance Archer do a moonsault that I hope that he brings that. I want to see him bring that to his arsenal in AEW.
I don't.
I just loved it.
I think at the time he did that when he was trying to get noticed, it was a good time to do it. Now that he's an established monster, I really don't want to see him do that. Although I think he did something similar. He did kind of a high flying. Oh, he didn't do like a walk the ropes and then do like a flip type move on.
Yeah, he did a moonsault from the middle rope.
Oh, he did. Okay, that's what he did. I knew he did something crazy on Wednesday night against who the hell was he up against? It was QT Marshall, right?
I don't think I thought it was against Rhodes that he did that moonsault.
Against who?
Dustin.
Oh, maybe it was. Yeah, I think you're right. Okay.
where he walked the ropes and then he
He
quick
moves out in front of
springboard.
you. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, he,
Yep.
he
Okay.
quick springboard to a moonsault position and then did a moonsault.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive.
And I think the only reason that worked was because Dustin was so big too. I don't think that could have worked against a smaller guy.
No, probably not. Yeah, I'm a little bit stunned that you thought that was the best part of the show.
No, it's just it was one of those moments where I was like, "What the hell did I just see?"
Yeah.
I don't know. This was my only negative. I had one negative with it, and I mean, if you look at Rhino, yes, he was an established star. Yes, he was a former world champion in ECW, but he was coming off the heels of his really disappointing WWE run. And they took Rhino and created a superstar in one night.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had him in Monsters Ball, and he took just a beating in Monsters Ball. Then he had that over-the-top rope gauntlet match, and then to win the title was those types of moments where you just created a superstar.
Exactly. Yeah.
My
That's. And I remember that that the first time I watched it, I remember feel like that night just having that euphoric rush of adrenaline from watching that happen.
Well, and I take that back. There were two negatives. The first was that gauntlet match. Like, why were those 10 guys chosen? Like, why did Kip James make it? That was his first match in TNA. And he was considered a top title contender. You know, why was Raven left out? And there were other guys around that time that should have been in that weren't. I forgot what a great character Monty Brown was when he was the alpha male. I forgot what a great character that Samoa Joe was when he was doing his whole shtick. The 3 Live Crew was still entertaining. The only other negative that I had in the entire night, and these are two just like throwaways. I questioned that gauntlet roster, and the other one was the whole point of Monsters Ball at that time was that people were locked away in a room, no light, no sunshine, no food, no water, and they were released right before the match, except for Rhino, who was out cutting a promo against Raven 3 hours before that.
Yeah, that definitely did stand out as a bit of continuity breaking, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, those were the only two negatives that I had in the entire night, which is funny when you think about a pay-per-view of 3 hours where they used a lot of the same guys multiple times. To have those be the only two negatives, that shows just what a great show this was.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only other negative I would see with it is just that, and maybe it's not even a negative because maybe it's just something that keep you wondering for a few more days until the next Impact. But why wasn't Raven involved anywhere in the Battle Royal, and where was he after
Right.
that promo?
But that was, that was always covered. Why was a guy like Raven and a guy like, and I can't even think of the roster back then, but I know there were people that more deserving of that spot than Lance Hoyt and Kip James.
Yeah.
And like AJ, I didn't have a problem with. Samoa Joe, Abyss. Sabu was okay. Yeah, he's a legend, so okay, I get that. Killings, I didn't have a problem with.
What I really liked about the fact that all 4 guys from that Monsters Ball were in the Battle Royal was that Don West had just said like 10 minutes before the Battle Royal started, none of the guys that were just in the previous match were going to be in here.
Right.
And they all 4 were, and then it gave Don West a chance to completely lose his mind every time one of those guys came out there.
Well, and then AJ being there after just getting done with that 30-minute Iron Man match.
Yep.
To be in that match, like literally 10 minutes later, was and I really liked.
Yeah, AJ basically had time to go to the back, hydrate himself a little bit, and then come back out.
And I really liked
maybe take a shit.
the way. I really like the way that all of those guys, like Samoa Joe and Lance Hoyt, they were fine. Three Live Crew, they were fine. They were normal. But I really like the way that all of the four guys from Monsters Ball and also AJ sold their injuries and how tired they were, and didn't make it like a comedy act. Like when one of my biggest memories from Raw, I think it was like 2001, 2002, Jericho had to wrestle 3 matches in one night. And when he came out for his third match, he was like doing the comedy stagger down to the ring. And I never felt that with any of these guys. These guys were acting legitimately hurt and beat down, and there was no way they should be walking to the ring, but they were doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Go
ahead. I
was going to say, I liked every match had drama. I mean, they weren't all 4 or 5 star matches. There were a couple, but I would give every card on this match at least a 3.5. I think the least exciting match of the entire night was that tag match, the one with the Diamond.
Diamonds in the Rough.
Diamonds in the Rough against Shark Boy, Apollo, and Sonny Saaki. Yeah. But even that was a 3.5 star match. Every other match on the card was nails. Everything hit perfectly. The overbooking at the end with the ridiculous amount of run-ins and chair and guitar shots and all that stuff really actually added to Rhino. So normally when I'd be upset about an overbooked ending like that, I was okay with it because Rhino ended up getting the victory, and it really took everything that Rhino had done throughout the night and just made it even better.
Yeah, I don't think it was. And that's why I don't think it was an overbooked ending. I thought it was a booked perfectly ending. I mean, overbooked in the sense that there was half the roster out there, sure, but I mean, I think it really did add to Rhino's crowning moment. And then they tried to bury him in the coffin. You're still all these years later when you hear that "get up, get up, get up" from the Dudley Boys, you're pumped. You're pumped when that music hits, and you know what's coming.
That was definitely, and like I said, normally if that had happened in any other match, I would have been pissed off, screaming about how they overbooked the ending and ruined it and all this stuff, but it fits so perfectly with that match. Just everything, the story about Rhino, the story throughout the entire night and probably for weeks leading into it. It just all fits so perfectly that it actually added to not only the match but the night.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think what this is setting up, if I'm not mistaken, the next month is a 6-man tag between the Dudleys. I'm sorry, I should say Team 3D and Rhino against America's Most Wanted and Jeff Jarrett. Where really it feels like it could be setting up like a lethal lockdown match with the emotions that's at stake.
Yeah, I was thinking more like a War Games type match, but I forget, that wasn't theirs. They had the Lethal Lockdown.
I think they did have one War Games match at some point before WWE trademarked it again or something.
It would have been probably in their Asylum years, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like 2003, 2004, maybe.
Because once they hit actual TV and we're on Spike every single week, I was glued to TNA. I mean, I didn't watch the pay-per-views because I didn't have the $50 to watch it, but I watched every single episode of Impact.
Yeah,
I think I did from right around the middle of 04 when they debuted up until maybe into 2010. Once the Hogan Bischoff era started, I really lost interest in it. But I mean, from 2005 to 2009, late 2009, I don't know that there was a better company. I actually preferred that to WWE, and I watched it more than I did Raw and SmackDown.
Yeah, I mean, one reason why you and I say that we're in such a golden age of professional wrestling is because we don't have to worry about that for the most part. I mean, we don't have to worry about a $50 pay-per-view every month for these companies. I mean, yeah, Impact charges $40 for their pay-per-views, but they're every 3 months. AEW charges $50 for their pay-per-views, but they're every 3 months. We have, and it's been years since we've had a an organization where we actually have to pay, $30, $40, $50 a month just to watch them follow their storylines.
And
And
the nice thing too is that Impact throws it up on their app 3 months later.
they do. And the other thing with TNA is if you I follow TNA basically from the beginning. I wasn't able to get every one of their weekly pay-per-views, but I basically got every other one of them. Like I would get I would watch, and I would basically get 2 a month, just kind of like you look at what cards are coming up, and I would, if there was a great one, I would get it, and then if the next one was great and maybe I couldn't afford it because I'd already gotten 2 that month or whatever, you know what I mean? But um, the great thing also about TNA in this time is that a lot of times they would have their big pay per view matches, and then maybe like in the next couple 2 or 3 weeks after that they'd have a rematch. So we'd still get to see those two guys face off against each other, just in a TV style match instead of a pay per view style match.
And one thing you'd mentioned too, because you mentioned it before I even watched it, so I was kind of paying attention. But those blackout screens, where all of a sudden the screen would go black and then it would, no time would elapse. I think what that was done in post-production because it only happened during the 4 big matches, the final 4 matches, the Monsters Ball match, the Iron Man match, the Gauntlet match, and then the main event. I think those were TV timeouts. I think they put them in their post-production so that they could take those matches and show them on Impact some night.
Definitely possible. And that's what I was wondering too, is because where they were placed, like you said, there was no time that elapsed, so it didn't make any sense that they were there.
But the placement of the black spots were at like those prime drama positions where normally, like AEW or WWE will take a break because they want you to come back to see what you missed because it's right after a big move was hit or something like that. So it almost looked to me like they did it in post production where they were like, you know what, we're going to throw this on an episode of Impact or Explosion or something at some point. So let's throw a commercial break in there.
Yeah, makes sense. They could even edit it for a DVD so they could throw ads in there too at the same time. Who knows?
Yeah, but it just
that'd be weird though. Never mind. That's probably not what happened.
It wouldn't surprise me with some of these wrestling companies, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And the other thing that you and I kind of went back and forth about on Friday night about this show is how great Mike Tenay and Don West are as an announce team. They get a lot of flack, and I think deservedly so for the first couple of years that they were together. But once they gelled, they were an incredible force for. They were just so goddamn enthusiastic, and it's hard to watch. I defy anybody to watch this, and even if there was a bad match going on, not that there was on this show, like you mentioned, and I mentioned, I think, but. If there was a bad match going on, I think these guys, their enthusiasm would carry to the point where it would at least be a passing grade for that match because you'd be so into the match based on their commentary.
And it was a weird dynamic too because we never get that face announcer. There's never that face play-by-play guy and the face color guy, but they pulled it off perfectly. Like they were not. It wasn't. You didn't have the over the top heel screaming commentator, color guy in the background screaming over the face play by play guy. These guys were both cheering for the good guys, and they didn't care. They didn't. There wasn't. I think it was an interesting dynamic to have them both being, rooting for the good guys.
Yeah, and even when they weren't rooting, they still had some great analysis. Like they talked about in the Iron Man match about how the things they were doing. The neck would set up things later on, and I mean it wasn't like there was loss of analysis just because one guy was heel and because they were playing the same roles basically. And I think Tenay, I think there were times where they kind of switched roles too, where Wes would call the action, then Tenay would give the in-depth analysis.
Which is what Mike Tenay was always the best at. I mean, that's what made his run on WCW so good.
Right.
And he really did mature into a great play-by-play guy. And like I said, like you said, and I agree that Don West was his perfect counterpart.
Yeah, I really think he was. And I mean, I know later on Taz would come in, and once those guys gelled, they were a solid team as well. But I still think, like, just the enthusiasm with West Don West approaches everything, and then Tenay is always, Tenay is always there's
Knowledgeable.
yeah, knowledgeable and also enthusiastic as well. I mean, this isn't like a somber time with these guys, or like they don't take it too seriously. They're just right there in the action with the fans, and I think that's
And
amazing.
they didn't rely on corny jokes. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved Jesse Ventura, I loved Bobby Heenan, and with Gorilla Monsoon, and Bobby then with Shivani, and his little one-liners and things like that, I thought made him probably the greatest color commentator of all time. But Don West didn't rely on any of that. There wasn't these little one-liners that were thrown in just to make the crowd laugh or make the audience laugh. He was just that happy to be there calling the action.
No, the closest Don West got to any kind of a catchphrase type thing was "No way, absolutely no way."
Which he did do a lot.
Yeah, but I think it was really in the moment. I don't think it was something that he planned out beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have the one-liners, he didn't have the jokes like that. You get that a lot with pretty much every color guy, and that's been since Bobby Heenan, since Jesse Ventura, is they've always got to have their funny little one-liners. And I never got that out of Tenay or out of Don West.
No, and you just said you think Bobby Heenan is the greatest color commentator of all time, and I always get down on you when we're having a conversation. You're like, well, that guy's 1 and that guy's 1A in some order, and I always get down on you about that. But I think Jesse Ventura and Bobby Heenan are a legitimate argument where it just depends on your taste in color commentators,
right?
As to which one you're going to take. And I don't think there is a 1 and a 2 between the two of them. I think they're just a hair's breadth apart from each other, whichever direction you lean.
Well, yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, Bobby to me is the greatest of all time. Jesse Ventura is so close behind him that another year of Jesse, maybe his awful run in WCW, maybe might have soured me a little bit more on him, where Bobby never had that awful run. But Jesse in WWF, not only his run with Gorilla, but before that, his run with Vince McMahon. He is easily right up there as one of the best color commentators of all time, too.
Yeah, I mean, I will honestly take Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura as a commentator team over just about any other team ever. I mean, Tenay and West, I think I would probably take them over anybody, but to me, WWF/WWE it's Ventura and McMahon every single time.
Yeah, and I mean, my other favorite, of course, was Gorilla and Bobby, because Gorilla played such a great... Gorilla being such a badass heel that he was, to play Bobby's straight man was just kind of surreal. So it was... I like those are probably my top 3 commentating teams of all time. And then, of course, we've got some good ones now with Riccaboni and Caprice Coleman and Kevin Kelly and whoever they threw out with him. I really liked when it was Stryker and Kevin Kelly. I thought they were a great team.
Yeah, and Kelly and Don.
Don Callis.
Don Callis were a great team, also. I thought.
Yeah, but I mean,
and Kelly and Carino in ROH were great too. So.
And I haven't gotten to see Kelly and Carino.
Hopefully we will.
Someday we'll get there. Now that we're renewing it, someday we'll get there.
Speaking of color commentators, I just have to say, like, Dave Prazak, I really enjoy in Ring of Honor, and still every time I see, and I know you probably never even heard him say this, Jeff, but still every time I see Samoa Joe, even in this match on Bound for Glory, have Jushin Thunder Liger down on the ground and doing the face wash to him, I still, in my head, I hear Dave Prazak singing, "Somebody's got a dirty face."
That's awesome. I really like the way that we're going to spend some time on that Iron Man match because that was just amazing. But I really like the way that Killings came out and started mocking Samoa Joe and his whole tribal dance, and then he just ate a right hook. I thought that was perfectly well done too. There were so many moments throughout this entire pay-per-view that were just perfectly done. Like you couldn't imagine. And by the time we got to the end of it, I was so exhausted with the whole, it was just, I hate to say it, but it was total nonstop action throughout the night. There wasn't any real duds of matches that, from the moment that the X Division had their match until the end of the night, I was glued to my TV. I couldn't look away.
Has anybody ever had the aura in pro wrestling that Samoa Joe had during his undefeated? I can't think of anybody. I mean, you could say Goldberg back in the time he would, but once Goldberg got in the ring, he kind of lost that to me.
Well, and not only did Samoa Joe have it then, I think Samoa Joe had that aura throughout his entire TNA run, but he also was able to capture that in NXT and briefly on the main roster.
Well, and Ring of Honor too. So I mean, we're talking about and I know you haven't seen a lot of his Ring of Honor stuff either, but I mean, to me, like from say 2002 through 2017 maybe 2018, yeah. So that's like 16 years of him just looking like this. He's just got that monster charisma to him.
Yeah, and he's not built like a monster. He's only 6 foot. He's 285 pounds. He looks like me. Literally looks like me. We're the same build. We're the same, height, weight, everything. And but he just has that presence where it's like, you don't fuck with this guy. And I can't think of another wrestler ever outside of maybe Andre the Giant, had Andre been a heel, that had that aura for that long. But he literally, from the time he debuted up until present WWE run, there's been his program against Brock Lesnar proved that he still has that.
Yeah, and that thinking about that and then thinking about the what happens after this pay-per-view goes off the air really bums me out, because we could have had these two rising forces in the company heading on a head-end collision towards each other for that world championship. And instead, 2 days after this, everything that was done at this pay-per-view in the world title scene gets totally wiped off the board. And that really sucks. Yeah, because
they got to throw it back on Jeff. But
if we could have seen Rhino versus Samoa Joe when they're both in their primes for that world championship, I mean, that would have turned heads, I think.
Oh, I agree. And it's a shame that they really did that to Rhino too, because they put so much effort into making him a mega superstar. And then just to have him lose the belt, and after he lost that belt, did he ever sniff the title shot again? I think
not that I can recall.
If I remember right, he just kind of became a bit player until he left and went back to WWE.
Right, and then we just saw him re-debut in Ring of Honor, where again he looks like a world killer.
Right.
And he's not going to be there either. And it's weird because I've never heard of Rhino being a politics guy backstage. I've never heard of him being, a cokehead or a drunk, so you really wonder, like, what was it that kept Rhino down, so to the past below level where we feel he should have been.
Well, and then when you hear the stories about how high Paul Heyman was on him, especially in the early 2000s, it really blows my mind that nobody took Paul Heyman's a fucking genius. To this day, he's still one of the best talkers on the mic. He's still got one of the best wrestling minds in the business. And he was able to take a little basically garage band and get them to play with the big boys because he knows what works and what doesn't. And for a guy like him, when you hear all the stories about how behind Rhino he was in 02, 03, and 04, how did Rhino never make it to that upper echelon? It just makes no sense to me.
No, and here, I mean, it's probably a lot of Jeff Jarrett just playing politics here. I mean, and I think he might even still be running the company at this point. I'm not exactly sure how that worked, how that all.
No, he was.
Out.
He was. Yeah. Both he and Jerry, they ran it, or they owned it until Jerry sold his because Jerry had I want to say like 60% and Jeff had 40%. And Jerry decided he wanted out, so he sold his 60% to Dixie Carter's dad.
Okay.
And then that's when Jeff kind of started slowly losing control, and then the whole incident with Karen Angle and everything kind of got him voted out.
Okay. And and honestly, like seeing Jeff in the shape he was in here and the form he was in with his promos here and everything, it's hard for me to say it was a mistake to put the title back on Jarrett. But what I will say is putting the title back on Jarrett 2 days later was a mistake. I mean, I think they could have at least had, gave Rhino a bit of a run and had Jarrett, work his way back up to getting that title back from him because, it's hard, like I'm saying, it's hard for me to say that Jarrett as champion here is a bad idea. But I think Jarrett as a champion, less than a week after you just made this incredible push for Rhino to the top of the card was a really odd and bad idea.
Yeah, from storyline perspective, yes, Jeff needed to have the belt because that's what the whole storylines they were doing. But Rhino should have at least gotten a 30-day run, and if he lost it, he should have gotten back there again. The fact that he never really got back there again is really hard to understand.
And Christian does come in, to the organization like 2 months after this, so I'm wondering if maybe Christian coming in changed the plans they had for Rhino too.
That's a possibility. Because when Christian came in, he came right to the top.
Yeah, because I think it's either January or February that Christian is in that mix for the World Championship.
Yeah, he walked in. His white pants promo is still one of my favorites of all time. Jeff, you're wearing white pants.
What if you soil yourself?
That's still probably that ranks up there as one of my all-time favorite promos too. But you're probably right. That's probably what ended up killing Rhino, is because they brought in, and didn't Raven leave the company shortly after that too? Because I don't think he was around when Christian was there.
That's probably right. I mean, I know that that at some point, in the summer of 2005, and remember we're talking about that in February 2005, so probably 4 months before this was kind of the time in between when TNA had a deal with Fox Sports Net and when they got their deal with Spike, which is where they're on right now. And I think what happened was they were off the air for a few months. Raven won not a Money in the Bank, a King of the Mountain match for that NWA World Championship. Lost it back like either right before or right after they got on TV. And then this is kind of like him like trying to get his rematch again. And yeah, I think he does leave the company shortly after, just because I think you saw the writing on the wall with the whole, push the reset button, have Jarrett stay at the top of the company, all that kind of jazz.
Well, and I mean, I think you and I have talked about this before too. It's hard for me to not. I mean, I understand why they pushed Jarrett as much as they did, because Jarrett at the time was probably the biggest household name that they had. I mean, for hardcore fans, you can't say that, because he was, the hardcore fans, we knew and loved AJ and Monty Brown and, Raven and Rhino and all these people. But from a name value, Jeff Jarrett had the name value. Former
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, now looking back at all these years later, like I can see when I don't have like my bias glasses on, like why the hell did you take the title off AJ Styles and all this shit? Like I can see like, yeah, Jarrett was in great form at this time, and he's really doing a solid job in everything he does, and he deserves to be champion. And I can also see like, we need to turn America's Most Wanted heel because the biggest tag team name we have is Team 3D, and we need them to be baby faces.
Right.
So I mean, I can see all that now, but 15 years ago when I was watching this for the first time, I was really soured on the whole idea. It didn't stop me from buying the goddamn pay-per-view because I was still buying what TNA was selling, but it was really kind of with they almost had to twist my arm a little bit to get me to buy into it. You know what I mean?
Well, and people really dogged Jarrett for what he did when he was, the first 5-6 years of TNA because he had the belt on him. He looked like he was calling in matches. I never saw that with Jarrett. To me, it looked like Jarrett was probably in the best shape of his life and best promo shape, did his best, not really his best in-ring work. I'd have to go back to, his before WWF days for that, but
yeah, I was going to USWA and World Class was his best ring work. After that, it was all way too choreographed for me.
But he became, his promo work, his attitude, his aura, he was in phenomenal shape, and it was choreographed, but he was so much better of a storyteller that it kind of fit a little bit more. So I personally, I think that the probably 02 to 06 Jeff Jarrett is probably the best that there ever was as an all-around complete entertainer.
So so you're saying like after he left WWE and after his 5 reigns as WCW World Champion is when he actually got to be the best version of himself?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Because when he was in WWE, especially his second run, he didn't seem like he was enjoying his life. And then when he went back,
for sure.
When he went back to WCW, it seemed more like he was that politicking Jeff, not really enjoying his life, not really putting everything into it. But in his run that first 5 years with TNA, you could tell that this was his company and he was doing everything he could to make it work. And he looked like he's having fun. He looks like he's enjoying what he's doing, playing the heel, playing the, and all credit to them for not going with the boss angle like they did in WCW and in WWE and in, the commissioners and all that crap. Not having him ever become the evil boss type character.
Yeah, there was a time in WCW, and I think this was right before they shut their doors. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was, where they tried to run Dustin Rhodes with Dusty Rhodes, and then Jeff Jarrett defending the world title against him again with Jerry Jarrett with his side and stuff. And I just like watch this show and I think how much better it would have been if they'd waited if this happened a few years later in TNA. Right,
when Dusty was doing there, because wasn't Dusty before Zbyszko took over? Wasn't Dusty their or whatever?
Their authority figure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
I just think it would have come across so much better in that organization when they weren't just like trying to throw everything at the wall to make it stick, and when Jarrett's in this kind of form.
I think the reason, I could be completely wrong with this, but I really do think the reason why something like that never happened is because I never felt like the Jarretts, even though they owned it, wanted people to know that they owned it.
No, but it wouldn't have had to have been. It could have just been, two second generation families. So you've got, and that's kind of how they did it in WCW, where like, Dusty's seconding Jeff and Jerry seconding. Dusty seconding Dustin and Jerry seconding Jeff, and they could have even had like a tag match, but with very little physicality between the two dads.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that would have worked.
I'm just, and I realize like I'm kind of fantasy booking here, but I'm just thinking I think that would have worked so much better in this version of TNA than it did in the dying days of WCW.
And this was before Vince Russo really got his teeth into TNA and started making just awful matches, like that reverse battle.
Well, this is after This is after Vince Russo's first run in TNA.
When did he create that awful battle royal, that reverse battle royal?
What was the? I'm trying to. I'm not trying to think what you're talking about.
Where they all started wrestling on the floor and had to work their way into the ring.
Also, it was like the gauntlet, but it had the step before that. I still think that was in like late 2004.
Was it? Okay.
I think so.
All I know is that
when he had the sex faction.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, that was in 2004.
I'll give all credit where credit.
For those who don't know what I'm talking about, it wasn't actually a sex faction. It was the initials were sex. It was Sports Entertainment Extreme. So. It
was not good. This is what it was. But TNA actually, you got to give them credit because they were coming in. They didn't have the roster that that WWE had at the time because WWE bought up everybody else. They basically got to where they were off of a bunch of outcasts and people that nobody wanted anymore. It wasn't like they did what like WCW did, where WCW brought in the top names from WWE. They brought in rejects, people that didn't make contracts, people that turned down contracts.
I'll get my dog.
To stumble across a guy like AJ Styles, who now is widely considered one of the greatest of all time, is something that you can't look past, and you've got to kind of give TNA credit for at the time. Their talent scouting was outstanding, absolutely outstanding. And when you look at all the people that they've had on their roster throughout the years, it just blows my mind that they were ever in any kind of financial issues. When they had the Young Bucks, they had Xavier Woods on that roster. They had Jay Lethal in his prime. America's Most Wanted was one of the better tag teams of all time. They had so many other people. Christian, as much as Christian was WWE and the Attitude Era and all that stuff, Christian really made his mark in his run in TNA. So sometimes it just blows my mind the amount of talent that went through there and the fact that they never really hit it out of the ballpark. Sounds like Shane is still gone. So
no, I'm back. I'm back now.
Okay.
I just got back. My dog likes to bark at everybody. So.
Oh, well, that's a dog.
Yes.
No, I was just saying it's amazing that with all the talent that they had come through that door, you've really got to give them credit, because people like AJ Styles was born and raised in that company. You had the Young Bucks through there at one point. You had Lance Archer was there at one point. You had Xavier Woods was there at one point. Jay Lethal really got his feet on the ground and made a name for himself with that company. And then look at
their biggest failure, Kazuchika Okada was there right before he broke big in NJPW.
Yeah, I'm not going to say they didn't have their misses. But when you look at a guy like Christian was a big name because of the Attitude Era and his Captain Charisma, persona in WWE. But I think he really kind of left his mark because of his TNA run.
Yeah, for sure.
He definitely, he was always really charismatic, delivered great promos, great in-ring work. But I don't think if it wasn't for that 2 years that he was with with TNA, I don't think that he would be as big a name as he was, because I think he really showed his promo work there. He really showed what he could do, not only in the ring, but in promos, and his relationship with AJ Styles was fantastic. I think that's where he really made his mark, was TNA.
Yeah, that's fair.
And how long was he there? Was he there 3 years? 2 years?
I think about a year and a half.
I don't know why I thought it was longer than that. All I know is it seemed weird that he was just gone one day. They introduced him as the face of the new stable that was going to fight against the Main Event Mafia, and then the next day he was gone and AJ was the leader.
Wait, who are we talking about?
Christian Cage.
Oh, see, so he came in 2005. He was facing Orton in 2011. He was back for a couple years before that. So, yeah, maybe 3 years.
He spent a year on SmackDown. He spent a year in ECW before they closed their doors. So yeah, probably 3 years. But all I know is I remember him coming out, and they wanted him to join the Main Event Mafia. And he turned his back on the Main Event Mafia, introduced this new stable, and I don't know what their new breed, I think they were calling them. I'm not sure. But they introduced him as the leader of this stable, and then the next week he was gone, and AJ was now in charge.
Yeah, I think they did call them the new breed, and I remember joking around when I was doing my first podcast here at LP Radio that they should have called them the Dudes with Attitude.
Dudes with Attitude. It was the new breed, because New Blood, that WCW, right?
Yeah, it was the new breed. Yeah, the new blood was the WCW one against the Millionaires Club.
Okay, yeah. Which is basically the same storyline. But it was done, the Main Event Mafia was done so much better than anything they did in WCW. Especially that last 3 years.
The more we talk about TNA in this show, the more I want to just go back and watch more TNA.
I was thinking that too. As I'm watching this pay-per-view, I'm like, holy shit. I just want to see their next one. I want to see how they followed this up.
Well, we do have a show to do next week,
You might as well. What is it? Sacrifices next?
Is it Sacrifice or is it Turning Point? I don't know. Let me see if my Impact Plus app is on my phone. I can't remember because I never watched it.
Genesis. Genesis is the next one.
Is it? Okay.
Yep. Unbreakable was the previous one, and then Genesis.
Yeah, and Unbreakable has, I think, what most people consider the greatest match in TNA history, which is that triple threat, which is definitely the best triple threat in history between AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, and Samoa Joe. But honestly, like watching this 30-minute Iron Man between AJ and Daniels, I find it. I really think that's a better match than triple.
Alexa, turn on living room light. It's starting to get dark in my house.
I don't know how you feel about that, Jeff, but I really feel like that Iron Man match is just fucking outstanding. It's transcendent.
I agree.
It's like, I watched that match and I know there's better matches out there, but when you watch that match, it's hard to remember what they are. You watch this and you're like, everything flows so smoothly, and even when it doesn't, it feels real. That match is just incredible. I mean, their first match I thought was overbooked. Their second match I thought was just pure poetry.
Well, their first match followed all of the what's become Iron Man match criteria with the
conventions. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's a 1-1 tie. We have to have the overtime, and this one was done so well that I didn't even realize even with that clock on the thing, it didn't feel like it went 30 minutes. I think the ending of this was done to perfection. Like, we kind of mocked the ending of the Michael Elgin Eddie Edwards match where they tapped and pinfall all at the same time, but this was done so perfectly with 1 second left on the clock that it was hard to argue against that finish.
Right, exactly.
And normally I'm not a big fan of 30-minute Iron Man matches, but they did a great job. AJ got that first 10 minutes, CD got that 10 minutes. They both kind of wore each other down. Nobody really went for a pinfall until the last 5 minutes of the match.
Yeah, and really, I mean, I'm not a big fan of 30-minute Iron Man matches either in this era, but I think 15 years ago we weren't at that level where there were these huge epic main events that lasted half an hour anyway. So
Right.
To me, a 30-minute Iron Man match, and that's kind of how it originated with Dustin Rhodes with Ricky Steamboat versus Rick Rude, and then Dustin Rhodes versus Rick Rude the next year, in back-to-back Beach Blasts, was kind of where the Iron Man match originated, at least on a major stage. So to me, this was kind of this is kind of like back to those roots. But yeah, I mean, not even going almost the entire distance with no fall, and then AJ, hitting that Styles Clash with 5 seconds to go, and then that 3 count coming down just before the bell was just perfection.
Yeah, like literally 1 second left on the clock. It wasn't. And I don't know, maybe that was a flub. Maybe they were going for it as time expired, but the way that it worked out was perfectly well done, because you can't, there's no arguing, well, it was a draw because the 3 count came right after the buzzer or anything like that. It was done. There was 1 second left. There was no way that CD could tie it up. It was just done perfectly. Absolutely perfectly.
Exactly. And even the spots in the match where you'd look and see, well, why didn't that get a fall? Like the BME, at that time, it's hard to remember 15 years ago that the BME was not his finishing move. His finishing move was the Angel's Wings.
Right.
But still, when he hits the BME, he doesn't hit it cleanly. He's got to roll Styles' shoulders back to the mat in order to cover him, and that costs Daniels that fall.
Right.
So the times that it looks like a fall should happen, there's a reason why it doesn't.
Yep. And that was some just amazing storytelling. Like I said, I think I told you yesterday that the drama in it really wasn't overextended. Like you watch other Iron Man matches and they're going for pinfalls, trying to get that quick early pinfall. I don't even think they went for a pinfall until that last 5 minutes. If I'm remembering right, there wasn't even an attempt for that first, 25 minutes of the match.
No, Daniels, tried to get the win with the Koji clutch, but yeah, as far as an actual pinfall attempt, I think you're right.
Yeah, and it was the Koji clutch that came at like the 15-minute mark after he'd had 5 minutes of his beatdown on AJ.
And if there were pinfall attempts, it was those a side headlock into a cover, roll back into a German suplex type pin and then roll back, Yeah,
the ones that aren't really serious pinfalls, or like Jericho's, and it didn't happen, but the example is what I'm saying. Yeah, with his flexing with the 1 foot and screaming, "Come on, baby!" That it was those type of pinfalls. They weren't legitimately trying to win the match. They were just trying to send a message or play head games or whatever.
Wear them down, yeah, all that kind of jazz. Yeah, I totally agree. And,
but yeah,
this was also like a match where it really felt like completely 50-50. Like, each guy had their shot to win. Each guy had control of half the match, and then it just happened that AJ was finally able to out wrestle Christopher Daniels for a brief 8 seconds, and that got him the victory.
Well, and the way that he struggled with the Styles Clash, where after he went for that pinfall, and then he tried to muscle up Daniels for the Styles Clash, led to the drama too, because there was 8-9 seconds when he first starts going, and it takes him 5 seconds to muscle up Christopher Daniels into that position. So the whole time you're wondering, is he going to be able to get this in time? Is he going to, there was just, it was so perfectly done. And this is really before, to us diehards, yes, we knew AJ Styles and loved him, before this. So it wasn't a big a big thing, but this was kind of that moment where you look at both these guys and you go, oh yeah, that's why AJ Styles is the greatest of all time. That's why Christopher Daniels is mentioned with the greatest of all time.
Yeah, there was a tweet we got from Ryan probably about a year ago when he asked us, you guys think AJ Styles is so great, like what are your favorite AJ Styles matches? Like this is up there for me.
Oh yeah,
that triple threat I mentioned is up there for me. That triple ladder match between Low Ki, Jerry Lynn, and AJ Styles. AJ Styles versus Low Ki for the NWA World Championship in late 2004. And then that first ever Master Crown X Division champion was when I first really took notice of how great AJ Styles really was. So these are the matches that stand out to me over his TNA career. I'm not saying that they were necessarily all his best stuff, but those are the ones that that live in my memory.
Oh, and you can't forget I think it was 2013, his match against Kurt Angle. I mean, pretty much anything he did against Kurt Angle was nails. But I think it was at the Unbreakable pay-per-view.
I think these ones stand out to me more just because they were in the infancy of the company. They were when, they were and they were with guys that were not as established as Kurt Angle or Jeff Jarrett or Christian. You know what I mean?
But you hit it on the head, though. If you want to know why AJ Styles is one of the greatest of all time, go back before he was a household name to 2004, 2005. Pick out any match he was in. That's why AJ Styles is one of the greatest of all time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Especially in this run, because he had three straight.
And he just all he did was pad his addition to me in NJPW and WWE, and it was his TNA stuff that had me on that track.
Oh yeah, me too. And when you look at this 3 straight pay-per-view run that he had, with that 3-way match, and then this one, and then the Iron Man match, the one before that against CD, that just 3-match run says so much for his career, because those were 3 of probably the best matches in the history of TNA.
Yeah, and his next couple of months, he's also got Petey Williams, and he's got an X Division title showdown with Samoa Joe 1-on-1 too. So I mean that this entire this like AJ Styles was on fire basically 5 years running in this.
Oh yeah, I don't think he ever had a bad night. And I think Bradshaw said that one time on SmackDown that he's been watching.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but he never had a bad night. But sometimes the booking let him down. Yeah,
I mean there is that, but he never. And Bradshaw said that on an episode of SmackDown. Is about a year into his run in WWE, he's like, this guy never has a bad off. He never has an off night. He is always 100% on in everything he does. And he's right. I mean, he's just you rarely ever see him botch a move, which is rare when you consider all of the high-flying and innovative stuff that he's done throughout the years. To realize that he rarely ever actually botches one of those moves is amazing.
And I'm enough of a homer for AJ Styles to say when he does botch a move, it's usually because his opponent doesn't know how to take it.
Like the Styles clashes?
Yeah, or like when he did the phenomenon against Chris Jericho at WrestleMania and Jericho messed it up.
Oh, yeah, when Jericho was a step too far out of position.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's usually the case. I mean, he does. I rarely have ever seen him botch a move that has been his fault.
Yeah. So, in summary, fuck the Undertaker.
I don't even acknowledge that as an AJ match. That wasn't a match. That was just 2 guys beating each other up in a graveyard. It wasn't a real match.
I know.
Really, Kat? Hey, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. So I mean, I would recommend that anybody go out and watch this entire show. It is truly a transcendent work of professional wrestling television. It's 2 hours and 46 minutes. You will not have a moment when you're not entertained. But if you're not going to spend that time on it, at least watch the 30 minutes of this match, because it truly is special.
Yeah, I mean, it's throughout the entire night. Like I said, every match on this card was great. Even the Monty Brown, and you wouldn't have thought about it because Monty Brown was never really known for his ring work. He was more of a character than anything. But to see a young Lance Archer like that, and they put on an actual really good match too, and then the Team Canada, I forget how great Bobby Roode was before Bobby Roode was the X Factor, or the It Factor, I mean.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, as I was watching this show and watching Bobby Roode on there and watching America's Most Wanted, I was like, I can't believe that you didn't say beer money when we were doing our Mount Rushmore last week.
Oh, it did cross my mind.
Okay.
It really did, because Beer Money was such a great tag team.
They were. I just always preferred America's Most Wanted. I know I'm in the minority on that, but I always preferred America's Most Wanted.
I think America's Most Wanted really kind of made their mark in their feud with Triple X. And it's hard with the match quality and the matches they put on. I know that, I mean, Beer Money may have been that may have had more title reigns. They may have involved in more storylines, better storylines. I mean, they were part of TNA's version of the Four Horsemen. Really, I don't feel like they ever really quite hit the same heights that AMW did.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, and you know, both guys would end up being TNA World Heavyweight Champions. So there's nothing against those guys. It's just that, to me, as a team, it's America's Most Wanted.
Well, Bobby Roode is still one of my favorite characters of all time. I mean, his run, I liked him, but I was and then I watched this match and I go, oh yeah, that's why I liked Bobby Roode later on, because he had that same crispness and everything. And then his I think what really got me on the Bobby Roode train was his it factor persona and his teaming up with Austin Aries, and the fact that he could go to NXT and pull off a stupid gimmick like the Glorious gimmick and actually make it work. It's Bobby Roode's kind of an underrated guy.
I don't think the Glorious gimmick was stupid until they changed it for the WWF main roster.
Yeah, I mean, it was great in the that first time he did it in TNA, or I'm sorry, in NXT at the Takeover, when he was floating down from the ceiling and everything. It's still one of the best entrances ever.
Yeah. Where else was going to go? There's some other stuff I was going to go with this. I know what I was going to. Talking about tag teams on here, you mentioned Triple X. And that brings me to the Diamonds in the Rough, and I had forgotten how great David Young is. I think I texted you that he reminds me of like the love child of AJ Styles and Arn Anderson.
Yeah, I laughed. I'm not kidding you. I laughed for 20 minutes about that text.
Well, he looks a lot like Anderson, and he's the Spinebuster as a finisher, but he wrestles a lot like AJ Styles too. It's kind of a shame he never got to be something bigger.
Right. Yeah, he didn't really. He kind of just went away, didn't he?
As far as I know, I mean, I think he wrestled a little bit in Ring of Honor as well, but I don't know, whatever happened to him, to his wrestling career.
I suppose I could Google it.
You could go googly-eyed over David Young if you want to.
I don't want to.
I'm trying to remember, but there wasn't a knockouts match on this card, was there?
Nope. The only the only knockouts we got were Tracy with Matt Bentley and then Gail Kim.
Yeah.
Otherwise, no, there weren't any female matches.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
And oh my God, I forgot how hot Tracy was.
A little bit.
And I also honestly forgot about how good Matt Bentley was. Because he really didn't do anything after TNA, did he?
No, he didn't.
He was with Ring of Honor for a little bit before he came to TNA, and then he really kind of hit his high point with TNA, and then I thought he retired.
Yeah, and it's still hard for me to think of him as Matt Bentley. I think I've always called him Michael Shane, regardless of his persona.
Who was he? He was Michael Shane in Ring of Honor, right?
He was Michael Shane originally in TNA as well. He's actually Shawn Michaels' cousin in real life. So
oh, is he really?
That's why
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I know he trained with. I was reading somewhere that he trained with Spanky, Brian Kendricks, and Paul London.
Yeah, they were all in that first class at Shawn Michaels Academy.
Okay.
And along with Brian Danielson.
He was really talented. He was actually a lot more talented, and he was another one of those guys that I just really forgot. And then, I mean, you're starting to see.
Think about that. Think about that class at Shawn Michaels Academy. That first class was Paul London, Brian Kendrick, Brian Danielson, and Matt Bentley.
And every single one.
Just think about the talent there.
And every single one of them could have been a Hall of Famer type. I mean, Danielson obviously is. Kendrick is. The other two just kind of went away, but they had the talent level to be.
Yeah.
They just never really, and you're watching this, and 3 Live Crew at the time was my favorite. That was my favorite tag team, favorite faction, all that stuff. But you're starting to see them kind of break apart a little bit with the Kip James storyline. And thankfully they did, because if they hadn't, we never would have gotten one of the best tag teams in the history of TNA.
Who's that?
Hernandez and Homicide.
Oh, okay.
They came in because Kip James broke up 3 Live Crew, and Conan went and brought them in.
Well, there you go. That's not a bad trade there.
The original LAX.
And I agree with you. I mean, I did enjoy 3 Live Crew. My only issue with it was that I was a huge fan of Ron the Truth Killings as a single star as well. And so having him kind of be relegated to that 6-man team, or that tag team, or whatever you want to phrase it, just kind of hurt my soul a little bit at the time.
Well, and not only that, but he's a 2-time TNA champion before he even joins 3 Live Crew. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he's with what is essentially he's one of my top 5 WWF wrestlers of all time in BG James, is one of the best talkers ever. And then the Mexican Hulk Hogan and Conan.
Did you see the Road Dogg as one of your top 5 WWF wrestlers of all time?
Yeah. His mic work and his wrestling ability is stuff that is, I mean, you got to put it as WWF wrestlers. He's not one of my top 5 wrestlers of all time, period, but definitely WWF. I mean, Savage is there. Road Dogg is there. Randy Orton is there. Jericho, obviously. And Bret Hart. Those are the 5 that I probably connected to the most.
The Road Dogg, Jesse James.
Yeah. Road Dogg is probably who got me back into wrestling, because I was out there for a while. Yeah, I don't think if it wasn't for the New Age Outlaws that I would have been watching WWF. Plain and simple. I was done with them when they started the whole, after Bret Hart lost, when he lost his title to Shawn Michaels in that Iron Man match, I checked out on them. I was done with the WWF. I wasn't going to watch anymore, and I didn't watch any wrestling until the New World Order showed up. And then I was a diehard WCW fan.
So I can understand why he'd be one of your favorite WWF wrestlers of all time. I can't understand why you'd have him as one of your greatest WWF wrestlers of all time. I look at the. I would even take the Honky Tonk Man over Jesse James.
Over Jesse James, yes, not over the Road Dogg.
I mean, I would take. I would probably take like 50 guys from the 80s in the loan over the Road Dogg Jesse James.
No, see, I can't. I thought he was a great worker in the ring. He was great on the mic. I can't, he's one of my favorites. He's one of the few guys that I rooted for no matter what he did.
I never saw him as a great worker in the ring, but I really did enjoy his team with Billy Gunn.
Oh, he was a very underrated performer, because people focused more on the fact that he do this silly little knee drop and that kind of stuff. They didn't realize how great his storytelling was.
All right. Anyway, I'm sorry. Move on.
I forgot what I was saying.
Yeah, I just don't want my head to explode. So
anyway, Killings kind of getting pushed to the background because of the talent of the other 2 people in 3 Live Crew. It was really painful for him because he was a 2-time champion, and then he just kind of got thrown into this stable and really pushed to the back because his personality just wasn't as great as the other 2.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I'll take Killing's personality over Conan any day of the week, but. All Conan does is go out there and go, "Hey, where my dogs at? Where they at?" Hey, let me speak on this. I mean, he has no personality as far as I'm concerned.
Who was it that called him the Mexican Hulk Hogan? Was it Bruce Pritchard?
I think so, and that's probably very relevant for like the time of when he was wrestling for AAA
and WCW.
But I still, I never saw him as having great charisma or mic skills. That was all we ever did was, hey, yo, let me speak on this. Where my dogs at? Where they at?
Once he became K-Dog. Once he became K-Dog, yes.
Well, that's what we're talking about here. That's literally all he did on this show that we watched.
But if you also look at Ron Killings, all he did was dance.
Yeah, so they might have put him to the back seat, but I don't think they put him to the back seat because he wasn't as good as Conan or BJ James. That's how they booked him in. In my opinion, if you look at, Jeff Jarrett, Rhino, Raven, Ron Killings, you've got and Samoa Joe, you've got and AJ Styles, you've got a year and a half, 2 years worth of world title storytelling just right there with those guys.
Yeah, I agree. But you can't argue that name value alone, he was the bottom end of those three.
Well, sure. And if you talking about name value, I suppose. But
that's what I was talking about.
Well, okay. BJ James had no name value whatsoever.
He had a cult following that followed him from his Attitude Era days as one of the most popular tag teams in the history of the company.
No, that I agree with. I'm just saying the name itself didn't have any value to it.
Oh no, BG James didn't. You got to realize when I'm saying name value, people realize that BG James is Road Dogg.
What? Yeah, if they actually tuned in and they saw him, they would realize. Or if they like saw an ad and they saw him on there, they'd be like, "Oh, that's Road Dogg. Let's see what's going on with him." I'm just saying that if somebody, I'm just saying that somebody that didn't know that, like if they were looking at this card, they would look at who the hell is BG James? You know what I mean? Who the hell is Ron Killing? So the only person really in this match, if they were looking at the 6-man match that any one of them would have known, would have been Conan.
Well, on that side, Bobby Roode and Eric Young on Team Canada.
I'm talking about like a casual wrestling fan that had not followed TNA to this point. They wouldn't know Bobby Roode or Eric Young either. They would only have known.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true. If we're jumping back to 2005.
Yeah.
But then when you actually see them, you realize that's Road Dogg.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying and you might even realize, oh, that's what the hell was his name in
K-Quick.
K-Quick, yeah.
And you wouldn't have realized that because I think he was only with the company for like a week and a half, did one little skit and dance on the stage before Road Dogg got fired and he followed.
Possibly, but I remember him as K-Quick. So
the only 2 times I ever saw K-Quick in WWE, and the name stuck with me, so they did something right with him. But he came running up to Road Dogg in the backstage, talking about how he wanted to talk to him. He needed to talk to him about a tag team. And then the next week they were a tag team. And then I think the week after that they did some rapping performance on the stage. And then Brian got fired, and K-Quick was soon to follow. So.
Yeah, and a couple more things about Ron Killings is, number one, I think his character when he was first rising to that world title level was one of the realest things I've ever seen in pro wrestling. And number two is he's also got one of the greatest finishing move names in wrestling too, the Hat Rack Crack.
The Hat Rack Crack.
Yeah. Your head is your hat rack, and then he's cracking you when he hits it. Hat Rack Crack.
Interesting. I'm trying to think of what his finisher was back in TNA.
I think it was like a suplex into a stunner.
I also, all I remember of Ron Killings, and it always annoyed me, especially after he came to WWF as R-Truth, was that he just always did the little flippy things.
Oh, what? He was. I'm sorry. It was. I think it was a suplex center originally, and then I think by the time he was in the world title, it was actually a scissor kick as his finisher.
Yeah, I mean the scissor kick's his finisher now, but he does like the, and it was before Ospreay really kind of made it famous. And I remember saying in the beginning with Will Ospreay that I hated it too, because I never really understood the little flips and stuff that he did. But now the more that Ospreay has grown as a storyteller, it makes sense. But that's one thing about Killings that I never liked, was that all of his little, like whenever he does that flying forearm, he has to spin 3 times or 2 times, whatever.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know, that kind of stuff always annoyed me. And like I said, it annoyed me about Ospreay too. I never understood.
Now I'm missing 2014, so I can go back and watch The Truth.
Our Truth?
No, The Truth, Ron Killings. The Truth, Ron Killings.
Oh, yeah, back in the day.
Back when The Truth was going to set you free. So.
When was that? That was 2004?
I think it was late 2004, or maybe... Was it 2003? No, it was 2004, I'm pretty sure.
It was before I started watching, so... And I started watching the end of 2004. And then I never missed an Impact from there.
Yeah, no, it wasn't when they were on television. It was when they were doing their $10...
The Asylum stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have to eventually someday go back and watch those Asylum years, too.
I really would love to. Such
a great time period, especially for this company.
Yeah.
But hey, we got to do the Extreme, and we have to do the other one first.
I know.
So much wrestling. All right. Well, I'm out of stuff on this one. We've been going for a little over an hour, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're at an hour and a quarter already.
Yeah, hour 15. So, I do you have anything else on this, other than it was great?
I don't. No, I don't. I mean, it's one of the. It is, if not the best pay-per-view in TNA history, it is one of the best pay-per-views in TNA history. So, I highly recommend people go back and watch this. This is where, they touted it as the biggest night in the history of the company, and I know that we've heard that a lot from other promotions, but this truly was a sensational night for TNA.
Well, and it was really their first big. I mean, this was the first time they ever did their Super Bowl of wrestling with this one, and they pretty much made it the greatest spectacle they could. I mean, I can't think of another pay-per-view outside of maybe WrestleMania 17 that delivered the way this one did.
Yeah, that's a good call right there.
I honestly, and when I look back at all the pay-per-views we've watched, everything we've seen, the only one that I could see that even holds a candle to this one is WrestleMania 17. I think this one was such a complete project from start to finish, and they had storylines that interloped. They had, to watch a 3-hour pay-per-view and only have 2 negatives on the entire thing is amazing. I had more negatives about WrestleMania 17 when I watched that.
Okay, so Ron Killing's first reign as NWA World Champion happened to August 7, 2002. And then he won it back May 19th, 2004.
Wow, they put that on him quick.
Yeah, he was actually their second champion right after Ken Shamrock.
That's what I was going to say, because Shamrock won it and only held it for like a month. And they start in like June or July of 2017 or 2002?
June 19th, 2002.
Was when they started.
So Shamrock held it for about a month and a half before Killings had a over 3-month reign with it before losing it to Jarrett.
And then, of course, to Jarrett. But then, I mean, that was a storyline that was 3 months in the making, too, because Jarrett was, I remember their first ever pay-per-view, Jarrett was barking about how he needed to win it. And they should have just handed it to him. And so, okay. All right. Well, guys, if you're listening to us on YouTube, we greatly appreciate it. Hit the like button, subscribe button, ring the notification bell so you can get this. We do this live twice a week. Hopefully, life settles down soon and quarantine maybe ends so that we can get back to some of our other normalcy. Also, our Patreon, patreon.com/Kingdom of Honor. Go ahead and head over there. We have archives. We have exclusive content only for you. And for a small donation, you can access all of that. Also, we do appear on Lords of Pain, Lord of Pain Radio's YouTube channel as well. Go ahead and check that out because some of our other friends are on there as well. And our Twitters. I'm at Regi Co-op. He is at ZenmanLOP. Use the hashtag DAD and the hashtag KOH. Anything that we put up show-related or wrestling-related, it uses that hashtag.
And this is actually our last week of being on Spreaker for LP Radio. We're going to be moving on to Red Circle. So stay tuned for, so keep an eye on that. We'll still send out our links to it. YouTube's going to stay the same for us, but now we'll be broadcast on Red Circle. Hopefully shortly after we go off live on YouTube, because we're gonna have to download the audio and then load it onto Red Circle. It won't be live as a podcast anymore, only on YouTube.
Oh, so the only place you can hear us live is on YouTube?
That is correct.
I like it.
And tomorrow night is we'll be back with you with Dynamite After Dark, right after AEW Dynamite goes off the air. On Thursday is MCLOP Radio Adventure. That will be the last broadcast on Spreaker for us. On Friday is WWF The Legacy Series, which will therefore be the first one airing for the first time on YouTube and then under Red Circle. And then we'll be back with you next week for... Oh my God, Jeff! Tomorrow night's the last time I have to worry about this fucking Spreaker thing. That's awesome.
Hooray!
And then next week we'll be back with you. And I think we kind of decided as we were talking we're going to go on to Genesis 2005, right?
Yeah. Yep. I think we're going to do that.
Yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be really awesome. Okay. I think I might even try to watch the Impacts leading up to that. I know the world title changes hands in between there. So
I know that I will. I'll try and check out a couple of them. I'm not going to make any guarantees on those, but
yeah, I don't blame you. I'm just saying I might watch that and kind of get back into the way I would have been watching back in 2005. So
yeah, that's not a bad idea because I really really enjoyed this pay-per-view and I'm really interested to see more of what was going on back then. They had
maybe even see a knockouts match.
Maybe. Ooh, the beautiful people are coming soon.
Beautiful people, beautiful people.
Oh, I love that faction. Oh, Velvet Sky.
Yes.
All right.
All right, that's all we've got. We'll try to do better next time. This is Shane saying long days, pleasant nights, and Jeff saying
goodbye.
G1 Climax 27. Goodbye. And good night.